Caton, obviously news that no one was expecting or wanted to hear. One of the great jockeys in this game, Garrett Gomez, passes away at the age of 44, someone that you knew very well.
Yeah, Greg, being from Chicago in the early 90s when Garrett Gomez first came on the scene as a rider, or really started to get in the spotlight a bit. I was working in publicity and television at Arlington Park. My dad had horses. Garrett rode a bit for my dad, but I think I echoed the sentiments of a lot of people who came into contact with him then at the time who were kind of impressed not only with his riding ability, and he was a natural rider and an exceptional rider, but also just a lot of humility and his ability to kind of stay the same, whether he was successful or when he was just starting out, as opposed to years later over the course of his career. He was always pretty generous with his time. At Arlington, did the breakfast shows and interviews, and would always give you a very in-depth analysis of a race, but from a very passionate perspective. A great interview, truly. And I was there in Canada, traveled to Woodbine when he rode Lady Shura for Noel Hickey and won the E.P. Taylor, and it really became a sensation at that point, right from the start. What I wasn't aware of, and a lot of people weren't at the time, was that he was battling some of his addiction issues at that time, which he was very candid about later in the book that you guys were just mentioning. But even after that, had to take some time out, went to Hot Springs, regrouped, spent some time with his family, and took a while, but eventually came back to Arlington. And I was just looking through online articles and some clips about Garrett, and was struck in 1997 by a column that Neil Milbert had written as Garrett had come back from some time on the sidelines, regrouped, and was right back where he had left off in Chicago in the winner's circle, winning the Mid-America Triple Series, winning all the big races and stakes races. And he had a number of resurgences in his career coming back from some of those injuries. Now, I was able to get to know him on a different level by horseback reporting on television, and interviewed him many times, and was there to interview him after he won the Breeders' Cup aboard Blame, beating out Zenyatta. And I think that's kind of one of those signature moments, at least in the career of Garrett Gomez, but also for me with the ride and the fact that he was beating Zenyatta alone, but underscored by the fact that just the day before the Breeders' Cup, he'd suffered a really bad spill, injured his shoulder, and there was some question whether he'd be able to ride. He came back and he rode brilliantly through the series. And when I interviewed him, I just listened to the interview back last night, he remarked about the pain he was in all weekend long, the fact that he had been icing his shoulder, but you wouldn't have known it for watching him ride. And he actually had to take a lot of time off to rehabilitate that shoulder and recover from that shoulder injury after the Breeders' Cup victory. But he was really gracious in the interview and humble even in victory. You could tell the pain he was in at that time. But the book you referenced, the thing I was struck about, and I was on the panel of judges for the Castleton Lions Tony Ryan Book Award that this was a finalist for, and met Dr. Alvarado at the time, but his candidness through any of his battles, and really the desire to serve as a lesson to younger riders and to try to be helpful and to try to save people from some of that trouble that had seen his career, was really evident in the book. And I think it's very rare in this industry or any industry where you see that kind of candor and where you see someone really willing to share some darker times as well as the positive times. But I had one time that really stands out, guys. In the first Breeders' Cup I ever worked at Monmouth Park was a sea of slop, as you well know, for the 2 days. And Garrett was on Discreet Cat, and at that time, and the Blame was one of the rare interviews where I got to do a winner's interview. Most of the time I was talking to a jockey on a favorite or a significant horse that did not win. So we were doing the quote-unquote loser interviews, which normally no jockey likes to do. And I had some issues, and it was the last race of the day, and it was wet, and soaking wet, and I went to ride up to Garrett to interview him after for that interview aboard Discreet Cat, and my pony threw his head down to the ground and went to try to buck. And Garrett looked at me and he started to laugh and he said, "I'll come to you, I'll come to you." And that's the type of person he was, at least for me professionally. He was quick with a smile, a kind word, always trying to help you out. Later that evening, I met his family. He was quick to introduce me to his mother, I believe, who was there, and knew Pam and his kids very well. And you know, all I can think of through this is the sympathies toward them, and I hope that they understand how well liked and respected he was in the jockey colony. And I don't know anyone who didn't really enjoy having Garrett around and in the sport.
Yeah, Caton, he had that rare combination of elegance, right? You don't see that too often really in riders. He's extremely elegant, and he was also extremely tough. I mean, like most jockeys, but I mean, you referenced his ride on Blame in the Classic. I mean, it was diagnosed a few days later. Oh, my shoulder. He finally told his agent, Ron Anderson. They checked it out. He had a broken shoulder. I mean, he rode one of the great races really ever, especially with what was on the line in the Breeders' Cup Classic, beating Zenyatta by an inch, and he had to give a perfect ride. He did. He did with a broken shoulder. Didn't even know about it. He just knew he was in a lot of pain at the time. What are you going to do? I'm here to ride.
Matt, he was a natural from the very beginning. He really, truly was. And he had that rare combination of really good hands, but strength as well. Could be an extremely fierce finisher, a strong finisher, and was amazingly versatile. You know, you hear about jockeys who specialize. They're really good at getting on the lead, or speed horses. They're great on the turf. Garrett was equally adept at anything he was riding on any surface and any circuit or venue. And that was something that I think will carry him into the Hall of Fame. And I hope that anything else about his personal life, and much like Chris Antley, it took a while for him to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, which I think most people in the industry would have agreed was an automatic for a rider as talented as he was. The same is true of Garrett Gomez. There's no question about his abilities on a horse. And also a lot of courage. He was very fearless on the track, which kind of belied his personality, which was a bit more humble. He was a very filled with humility, but he also had a great sense of humor, and he could bring a smile or a laugh to just about anybody. And I think you would find that among everybody who was around him in the jocks room, workers, as well as the reporters who interviewed him and the jocks that he rode with.
Caton, thanks for sharing.
Thanks, Caton.
Certainly led the nation in purse earnings 4 straight years, 2-time Eclipse Award winner, and gone way too soon, but certainly one of the greats, and he will be remembered for a long, long time. And what he did, just in the courage that it took to undertake the project of writing that book as well.
Yeah, no kidding.
Got to be very difficult.
And as Kate mentioned, he's a Hall of Famer. I mean, you know, we're so caught up into it. It's great to be durable and good for a long period of time, but there's nothing wrong with being the best at your craft for a shorter period of time. I mean, I'm not going to compare him completely to a Sandy Koufax, but that was Koufax, right? He didn't do it forever, but he was the best, one of the best riders of all time for a 7-year run. Garrett Gomez was one of the best riders on the planet. He probably was the best rider around for 5 or 6 years. Hopefully he will be in the Hall of Fame.
We'll have the opener from Gulfstream as we get to racing in just a little bit. Again, Garrett Gomez has passed away. That happened on Wednesday, the age of 44.